So you sat there trading away and bam, the screen locks up in front of you. How are you going to deal with the exposure and protect your balance in this kind of situation? Okay, so this was a question that was asked on the forum this week, and although I considered it to be a fairly obvious question, there were some good things that come out of it. So I thought I'd create this YouTube and share it with the broader audience. Now, if it can help just 1 or 2 people, or even one, from losing a load of money, because this is an expensive lesson, then it will be totally worth it. Over the years, it's happened to me a few times, and I can think of one situation in particular where it cost me a few quid. I'll tell you more about that in a second, but for now, let's get straight to the point. In this clip, we're going to go through what you should do in such a situation when the screen locks up in front of you. 1 minute you're happily trading away, next minute you're staring at a frozen screen with, potentially a large exposure. 2, what you should be thinking about before it even happens to prevent and make sure that you're in the best possible situation to deal with that. And finally, the situations where you should be more cautious about this kind of thing happening, and be more aware and more prepared, I guess. So to paint the picture again, we're back at mid-afternoon, trading away, markets are moving about, got a trade open and the screen locks up. It's everybody's worst nightmare. First thing that's going to happen is panic's going to set in. The blood's going to drain out of your face, your mouth's going to go dry, and you're going to think, oh God, how am I going to deal with this? Which is usually where the first mistake comes in. So I'll come back to this in a second. But in such a situation, when this happens and you're trading away, no matter what software you're using, I would advise you do not close down the software window or the browser window that you're currently using, because you want to see the information that's on the screen, potentially further down the line. But I'll come back to that in a second. So the second point I mentioned there would be to be prepared. Now, the most important thing is being prepared all the time, because prevention is better than cure, there's that old saying. And it's a hell of a lot less stressful too. And it's obviously a stressful situation, which makes you more prone to making snap decisions and little mistakes. So before the problem even arises, you want to make sure that you've got the best possible connection, and the fastest possible connection, most reliable connection, and you are hardwired. So when I say hardwired, I mean that you've got an Ethernet cable going from your router to your PC or trading device, to ensure that there's not that extra variable put into the mix of Wi-Fi, that kind of thing, because it could be the Wi-Fi that drops as well. I understand that if you're just learning and using a small balance, it might not bother you so much, but this is certainly something you want to think about, particularly when you start to use more money than you're comfortable with, or than you're currently comfortable with. But when you're trading, this is what I'm saying, when you're trading, sometimes you might have £5 exposure or £10 exposure in your head, because you're only going to allow the price to go 5 or 10 ticks, and that's completely fine. But if it locks up in this situation, it might be a case of your exposure was 5 or 10 quid with it moving in each direction, but your overall exposure, if the trade is to run as an actual bet, will be several hundred. So it's best to be prepared. So make sure you've got a solid connection, or as solid as you possibly can have. And secondly, I would say have a secondary backup device logged in and ready. That is probably a little bit more diehard, people that are trading more often. You might think that doesn't apply to you, but trust me, in this situation, when that happens, you're going to be reaching out and wanting that there and prepared. So consider being logged in elsewhere. There's lots of options and lots of different alternatives now, but I'll go through the main points there, and then they'll give you a few extras just afterwards as well. So my advice, and actually this came up on the forum as well, which was really useful, would be to make sure that you've got your mobile phone handy nearby with the app on for the exchange that you're trading, preferably logged in as well. Further than that, take it one step further, you want to make sure that you actually know how to navigate around the app, because it's all well and good downloading the app and logging in, and if you haven't used it before, in this situation, when you've got potentially a minute, 2 minutes until the start of a horse race that you might be trading, and you're exposed for a significant amount of money and panic set in, all of a sudden you're just not going to be able to find your way around it, because that's just how how these things work. So make sure you're familiar with the app, the way to get around it, and which markets you're going to be on if you're trading. From there, you just want to tap the cash out button. So it's really quite simple. If your phone's logged in and you know which market it is, bam, bam, on the market, tap cash out. Now that's brilliant now. In years gone by, which I'll explain in a second happened to me, there wasn't that option, so it was a little bit trickier. So previously the thing that I would advise would also be to have your telephone account number ready and the number saved in your phone. So, I've got the Betfair help desk saved in my phone book, quickly call it up, the telephone account number is blah, blah, blah. At which point, they're going to turn around and say to you, what do you want to bet and where? So now's a bit easier because you can say, I just want you to cash me out. But in years gone by, this happened to me on a busy Saturday afternoon. I can't remember what the exact event was, but I called up and I was like, right, hedge me out, hedge me out. And the operator was, do what? Hedge? What do you mean hedge? And you've got to bear in mind, there's like a couple of minutes to the start, and I think I was exposed for a couple of £1,000 at the time. And I was like, I want you to lay on this particular selection. It's like, okay, how much? Now, at this point in time, I had closed down the browser window. If I hadn't have done that, I would have been able to say, on X runner, lay me for, 432.64 at a price of 4.5, please. Bang, job done. But because I closed down the browser window, I didn't even know where the position was to hedge up. So that's why I said right at the beginning there, make sure you leave the window open. If your computer should log up, you lose your connection, etc. So the secondary thing would be to use the telephone service to hedge out your bet. But obviously, things have come on a little bit since then. Cash out's a lot more mainstream, and so it's more likely you can just say, cash me out on this selection. So they would be the main bits of advice to deal with such a situation where it freezes and locks up, and you haven't got a significant backup connection set up hardwired elsewhere. You might not have the luxury of having offices, is what I'm trying to get out there. So alternatives to that, which hopefully you'll never need, is to use another exchange such as BetDAC. With that, you might want to bear in mind if you're paying premium charges, then you could potentially end up paying premium charges on one portion of the bet and closing out and leaving yourself in a negative there. So that's something you need to bear in mind, and why it's preferable to use the app and whatnot. Again, in extra to that, you could have the dongle, 4G dongle. It's what people have used in the past. I'm not really a fan of them. Or also use your phone as a tethering point to as a hotspot to connect to then carry on using the trading software you're currently on. They're not my primary advisory things, but they're options too to think about. Some people obviously might want to do that. But the one thing that I did want to hammer on after this was be very aware of when these situations are most likely to occur. Now, occasionally, the exchange goes down. Nobody's a fan of that, and so in which case you might be forced to hedge up on BetDAC or another exchange. But when these situations happen, it's usually around some of the primary events of the year, so things like Cheltenham or Ascot, or even on a Saturday afternoon. So as I was saying earlier, it might not apply to everyone. Everyone might not want to do this off the bat because they're not trading large stakes. But I would say either way, make sure you've got a backup ready on a Saturday or these big events, because it just makes absolute perfect logical sense. If there's anything else that anyone can add there, which I've missed out, I don't think there really is, feel free to drop it in the comments below, and I'll be checking up on that so I can get back to you there.